Hello, mighty companion. This is Earl Purdy, and I'm going to do A Course in Miracles Lesson 74. A Course in Miracles Workbook Lesson 74. A Course in Miracles Workbook Lesson 74. There is no will but God's. There is no will but God's. I want you to think about that. There is no will but God's will. The idea for today, there is no will but God's, can be regarded as the central thought toward which all our exercises are directed. The central thought that all these exercises are directed to is the thought that there is no will but God's will. That means there is no mind but God's mind. There is no mind. The Course defines will and mind. It's the same thing. So that means there is no mind but God's mind. And we've also learned that God, from a Course perspective, is love. So that means there is no mind but love's mind. There is no will but love's. There is no will. There is no will but love's. There is no will but love's. God's is the only will. Love's is the only will. When you recognize that the only will is God, when you have recognized that the only mind is God's, when you have finally recognized that the only will is God's, you have recognized that your will is God's. You will recognize that your will is God's when you recognize that there is only God's will. When you recognize that there is only God's will, you'll also recognize your will is God's. That means that the belief that conflict is possible has gone. So how will you know when you have accepted that your will is God's will? When you have accepted that your will is God's will, you won't have any conflict. You won't be in any kind of conflict. When you accept that your will is God's will, there will be no conflict. When you have accepted that your will is God's will, your will is the will of love, and you know your will is the will of love, there will be no conflict. Peace has replaced the strange idea that you are torn by conflicting goals. You've had the strange idea that you are torn between goals that conflict, and you're going to have that feeling of conflict replaced with peace. As an expression of the will of God, you have no goal but God's. How can you tell when you are expressing the will of love? You will have no goal but love. When love is your only goal, when God is your only goal, that's how you know you're finally expressing the will of God, because it's God's will that God be your only goal. It's love's will that love be your only goal. There is great peace in today's idea. There is no will but God's. The exercises for today are directed towards finding great peace. These exercises are directed toward finding great peace. The idea, there is no will but God's, is wholly true, which means totally true, which means there is no will but God's will. There is no will but the will of love and happiness. So there is no will but God's. That idea cannot give rise to illusions. That there is no will but God's that idea cannot cause any kind of fear. Without illusions, conflict is impossible without illusions. So to be in conflict, you'd have to have some false ideas. To be in conflict, you'd have to have some false ideas. That's what an illusion is. An illusion, according to the Course in Miracles, is a false idea. So, without false ideas, conflict is impossible. So let us try to recognize this today, that if you're in conflict, you have some false ideas. If you are in conflict, you have some false ideas. If you are in conflict, you have some false ideas. Let us try to recognize that today. Experience the peace, this recognition that if you didn't have false ideas, you wouldn't be in conflict. If you didn't have false ideas, you would not be in conflict. So all conflict comes from false ideas. And there's great peace in that idea. I want you to experience the peace, this recognition that there is no will but God's brings. Begin the longer practice periods by repeating these thoughts several times. Repeat these thoughts several times. Slowly repeat these thoughts several times. Repeat these thoughts with firm determination. Say this 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 with firm determination. To understand what these thoughts mean. If you want to understand what these thoughts mean, you repeat them several times slowly with the firm determination to understand what these thoughts mean. Hold these thoughts in your mind. Hold these thoughts I'm about to give you in your mind. There is no will but God's. I cannot be in conflict. There is no will but God's. I cannot be in conflict. There is no will but God's. I cannot be in conflict. There is no will but God's. I cannot be in conflict. There is no will but God's. I cannot be in conflict. There is no will but God's. I cannot be in conflict. There is no will but love's. I cannot be in conflict. Then spend several minutes in adding some related thoughts. Spend several minutes. Add some related thoughts such as, I am in peace. Nothing can disturb me. My will is God's. My will and God's will are one. God wills peace for his son, his child. God wills peace for its child. I am at peace. Nothing can disturb me. Nothing can disturb me. Nothing can disturb me. My will is God's. My will is love's will. My will and love's will are one. Love wills peace for its creation. I am at peace. Nothing can disturb me. My will is love's will. My will and love's will are one. Love wills peace for me, love's creation. During this introductory phase, be sure to deal quickly with any thoughts of conflict. Deal quickly with any conflict thoughts. Deal quickly with any conflict thoughts. Deal quickly with any conflict thoughts that may cross your mind. Deal quickly with the thoughts of conflict that cross your mind. Deal quickly with the thoughts of conflict that cross your mind. Tell yourself immediately when you have a thought, an ego thought, whenever you have an ego thought, a fearful thought, an angry thought, a thought of conflict, tell yourself immediately, there is no will but God's. These conflict thoughts are meaningless. These conflict thoughts are meaningless. There's no will but love's will. These fear thoughts are meaningless. These conflict thoughts are meaningless. There is no will but God's. These conflict thoughts are meaningless. If there is one conflict area, if there's one area of conflict that seems particularly difficult right now, if you have one area of conflict that seems particularly difficult to resolve, if there's an area of fear or conflict in your life that seems particularly hard to resolve, single it out for special consideration. If there's one area that you are having more fear and conflict and upset than any other area, I want you to single the area that you're most upset about out. But do you know the area that you're most upset about has already been singled out the most because you're upset about it the most? So I want you to think about the thing that you're upset about briefly, but I want you to think about the thing that you're upset about very specifically. Specifically, think about the thing that you're upset about. Think about the thing you're upset about. Think about the thing that you are so upset about. Think about the thing you're in conflict about. Think about the thing you're in conflict about. Think about the thing that you're in conflict about. I want you to identify the particular person that you're in conflict about. Identify the particular person that you're in some kind of conflict about. Identify the persons that you are feeling some kind of conflict about. I want you to think about the situation. Think about the situation very specifically that you are feeling conflict about. I want you to think about the situations involved that you feel conflict about. And then tell yourself, there is no will but God's. I share it with them. My conflicts about this cannot be real. There is no will but God's. I share it with God. My conflicts about this or my conflicts about them cannot be real. There is no will but God's. I share God's will with God. So that means my conflicts about whatever cannot be real. There is no will but God's. I share God's will with God. My conflicts cannot be real. There is no will but love's will. I share love's will with love. My conflicts about whatever it is cannot be real. There is no will but love's. I share that will with love. My conflicts about whatever I think I'm upset about can't be real. There is no will but God's. I share it with Him. My conflicts about whatever I think I'm in conflict about can't be real. There is no will but God's. I share it with Him. My conflicts about whatever cannot be real. There is no will but God's. I share it with Him. My conflicts about whatever it is cannot be real. There is no God. There is no will but God's. There is no will but God's. There is no will but God's. I share it with God. My conflicts about them cannot be real. So, after you have cleared your mind in this way, then close your eyes, and try to experience the peace in which your reality entitles you. Close your eyes and experience the complete fulfillment to which your truth entitles you. Sink into the peace to which your reality entitles you. Feel the peace in which God entitles you. Feel it closing around you. Feel great peace closing around you. Sink into great peace closing around you. Sink into great peace flowing around you. Great peace is flowing around you. Now, there may be some temptation. There may be some temptation to mistake these attempts for withdrawal. There may be some temptation to mistake these attempts that I'm giving you for withdrawal. But the difference is easily detected between withdrawal and letting peace surround you. Do you know that if you are succeeding, you can tell if you are succeeding, because if you are succeeding, you will feel a deep sense of joy. If you are succeeding, you will feel a deep sense of happiness. If you are succeeding, you will experience a deep sense of happiness and joy. You will experience an increased alertness rather than a feeling of drowsiness and enervation. If you are succeeding, you will feel an increased alertness. If you are succeeding, you will experience an increased alertness. If you are succeeding, you will experience an increased alertness. Joy categorizes peace. Joy is a characteristic of peace. Joy is a characteristic of peace. By the experience of peace and joy, will you recognize that you have reached it? By the experience of it, you will recognize you have reached it. You will have reached it because you will have the experience of it. If you feel yourself slipping off, into withdrawal, that means you're feeling some drowsiness or enervation. If you feel yourself slipping into withdrawal, quickly repeat the idea for today. There is no will but God's. Do this often. Tell yourself there is no will but God's. As often as necessary, tell yourself there is no will but God's. Tell yourself this as often as necessary. Tell yourself there is no will but God's. There is a definite gain in refusing to allow retreat into withdrawal. Even if you do not experience the peace you seek, there's a definite benefit in refusing to allow yourself to retreat into withdrawal. Even if you don't feel the peace that I'm talking about at first, there's a definite benefit in refusing to allow yourself to retreat into withdrawal. In the shorter periods, which should be undertaken at regular and predetermined intervals today. In shorter periods, say to yourself, there is no will but God's. I seek God's peace today. There is no will but God's. I seek God's peace today. There is no will but God's. I seek God's peace today. There is no will but God's. I seek God's peace today. Then try to find what you're seeking. Try to find what you're seeking. Try to find what you are looking for. Try to find what you are looking for. Try to find what you are looking for. A minute or two every half hour for a minute or two with your eyes closed. Every minute or so, every hour, 1 minute or so, with your eyes closed, if possible, would be well spent on what I'm talking about today. Remembering that there is no will but God's. There is no will but God's. These conflict thoughts are meaningless. There is no will but God's. I share it with God. My conflicts about whatever it is I'm in conflict about cannot be real. My conflicts about whatever it is I'm in conflict about cannot be real. There is no will but God's. I share it with God. My anger about whatever or whoever cannot be real. There is no will but God's. I share it with God. My fear about whatever I'm afraid about cannot be real. It cannot be constant. It cannot be eternal. It cannot be everlasting. Something that's real is something that's constant. It's something that is eternal, that never ends. There is no such thing as a conflict that will not end. And so there's no such thing as a conflict thought that means anything. There is no will but God's. These conflict thoughts are meaningless. Man, this is so cool. Feels so good. There is no will but God's. There is no will but God's. There is no will but God's. Mighty companions, this is Earl Purdy. Earl Purdy. If you like to hear more of my videos and see my classes, hang out with me, go to www.earlpurdy.com. www.earlpurdy.com. Yeah, there is no will but God's.